So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Reiki Guild webinar with Ann Baldwin. I'm Rosemary Ferrer. I'm from the Reiki Guild, a professional association. We're part of the Reiki Council, which is the standard setting body for Reiki in the UK. So we're just waiting. Got a few people saying they couldn't get in, and now they're saying they have got in. That's brilliant. Welcome to you all. So I first came across Ann Baldwin years ago with the Reiki Council. Actually, I don't know if you remember Anne.
Oh yes, I remember.
And you got to the Reiki Council because you'd been looking for a share group in Bristol with one of our other members, and just by complete and utter chance, you got in touch with Jean, who's also one of the Reiki Council members, and she brought you to the council. So shout out to Jean, because I know Jean's listening today. Anyway, a little background for everybody who's not aware of Anne. She's a PhD. She's Director of Mind, Body Science and Professor of Physiology at the University of Arizona. And physiology was what she did her master's in after a degree in physics. That's right, isn't it, from memory?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was never quite sure where you switched from physics to physiology. Very interesting, but it's
well, physics is how the world works, and physiology is how the body works.
Good point. It's just not another leap that I'd really seen before. It's so interesting. So what Anne does is study the physiological effects of mental and emotional stress, and quantitatively evaluates methods to reduce stress. She's a Reiki Master. She's practiced Reiki on people and animals for many years, and she has just published, I think you'll see at the bottom of the screen, Reiki in Clinical Practice, which is a science-based guide. And if you're joining us, you've probably noticed that her publisher, Handspring, have given us a whopping 20% off and free post and packaging in the UK. So that is an amazing offer. So do follow the link if you would like to do so after the webinar. So really what Anne's here today is describe her journey from sceptic to Reiki Master. And I think most of the point really explain how scientific research helps us to get the most benefit from a Reiki session. Now, we'd love to take your questions at the end, and you'll notice, depending on what kind of device you're joining us on, that there is a Q&A button. It might be at the top, it might be at the bottom, it might appear and disappear. But if you can pop your questions into that, and we'll answer them at the end. If you really can't find it, there's a chat box. Come and say hello, join in the conversation, and love to hear your thoughts. This is your chance to actually ask those kind of research sciencey questions that very few people in the world, to be honest with you, have the ability to answer. So we're very honoured to have Anne here with us today. On that, I'm going to hand it over to Anne.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm really happy to talk about my work. So I'm going to shift to my screen now. So this is the outline. So I'm just going to have 4 parts. I'm going to first of all talk about what got me interested in Reiki. And I was initially a skeptic. I had never heard of Reiki before. So I'll talk about how I got interested in Reiki. And I will mention my experiments on rats, Reiki experiments on rats. That were my first experiments involving Reiki. Then I'll talk about my Reiki experiments with people, focusing on blood flow in the fingers. I'm sure you all know that when you do Reiki, you've all experienced heat, especially in your hands. So I have a device that actually measures the blood flow and images the blood flow in the fingers. And then I'll talk about a couple of clinical studies I did looking at effects of Reiki on range of motion in people with shoulder issues, shoulder restrictions, and then total knee replacement. Then I'll give a short summary of findings from other Reiki research. And then I will address the question of how does Reiki work. Of course, nobody knows exactly how it works, but there are some interesting ideas of how it might work. And I'm going to focus on the importance of Gassho breathing there too. So, what got me interested in Reiki? Well, I have to go back way decades ago when I was a physiologist, or I'm still a physiologist, but I was working on blood substitutes. So companies were trying to develop substitutes for real blood because there was a shortage of donated blood. This was all in the AIDS epidemic, so it was difficult to get good real blood. So companies were trying to develop blood substitutes. And I had a couple of grants to test these blood substitutes, injecting them into rats to see if they caused any damage to the blood vessels and to the intestine. And I was working at that time at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Tucson, and it was very quiet there. Not many people were doing experiments on animals. And so I had my blood substitutes rats. I'd inject the blood substitutes. And unfortunately, that did cause inflammation and damage to the blood vessels. And none of those products were ever approved in the United States or in Europe. Anyway, and then the control rats had saline injected and they were fine. And then I moved to the university and my experiments didn't work anymore. So both sets of rats showed inflamed intestine and damaged blood vessels. And so the only thing that had changed was where I was keeping the animals. And I discovered that the new animal facility was very noisy, lots of people coming in and out, doors slamming, machines starting up. And I observed the rats and I thought that they were getting stressed by the noise. And I got a grant to study the effects of noise on the rats and did in fact find they were getting stressed by the noise. And so at that time, I needed a technician to help me analyze data. So I hired somebody who turned out to be a Reiki Master. And that's how I found out about Reiki. And she was very persuasive and she persuaded me to learn what Reiki was and to learn some Reiki. I think she trained me in level 1. And she said, well, maybe we could try Reiki on the rats to see if it reduces their stress. So this slide here, this is just to show you what the noise was doing to the intestine in the rats. So if you look on the left there, you can see this is actually the intestine here, small intestine, and these are blood vessels leading to the intestine. And this layer of tissue, a thin layer of tissue that you can't see holding the gut together is called the mesentery. And in the mesentery are these immune cells called mast cells. And when they are intact, this is what they look like. And then they will, when they're perturbed, they explode and release cytokines, chemicals that damage tissue and cause inflammation. And this is what was happening with the noise. These cells were exploding and releasing these chemicals that were causing inflammation. So then we did some experiments with Reiki. Sorry, this is rats in a quiet room. This is injecting the circulation with a protein, fluorescent protein, to see if any damage is being caused by the noise. Here, there's no damage. And then if you look on the right, this is a rat that's in the noisy facility, and you can see that the protein is leaking out. So there's a lot of damage in the blood vessels there. So then, this is me posing a long time ago, but we hired Reiki practitioners to give Reiki to the rats. And you can see here the rat cages, and there are 2 rats in each cage. And we had practitioners give Reiki to the rats for 15 minutes every day. And so they were in this noisy facility, and we wanted to see if the Reiki would reduce the damage that the noise was causing. So the results, 15 minutes of Reiki per day for 3 weeks, significantly reduced the leaks or the damage in the blood vessels that were caused by the noise. And we got that published in 2006. And this is just a diagram to show, to summarize what we found. So number of leaks and how big the leaks were. Remember, leaks in the blood vessels mean damage. And this is in a quiet room, so very small number of leaks. This is in the noisy facility, lots of leaks, lots of big leaks. And then this is with Reiki. And so 15 minutes of Reiki a day can significantly reduce the number of leaks and significantly reduce the area of leaks. So huge healing effect of the Reiki. And then we had one group of rats, we gave sham Reiki. That meant that somebody sat by the rats who was not trained in Reiki, just sat there. And you could see there was a slight reduction in the number of leaks and the area of leaks, but it wasn't statistically significant. So that's interesting. Just sitting with the animals did seem to comfort them and reduce the stress, but nothing like the Reiki. So this is really what got me interested in Reiki, and being a scientist and seeing that you could give Reiki to rats and heal this considerable damage in their intestine caused by stress. That was pretty compelling to me. And so it made a big change in my life, actually, because I completely stopped doing animal experiments. I just couldn't do that after I started doing Reiki. And well, I stopped working on rats, experiments where you have to cut the animals up. And then I moved on to just doing non-invasive experiments with people. And also I work with horses as well, making measurements on horses that just involve putting a belt around the girth area. So nothing invasive. I just can't do that anymore. So concluding those experiments, we found that double-blind controlled experiments on rats show that Reiki significantly reduces noise-induced intestinal inflammation and leaks in the microvessels, the small vessels. So double-blind controlled meant that we had different groups of rats. Some had Reiki, some didn't, and the people analyzing the data didn't know which animals were in which group. Okay, so as I said before, I couldn't do animal experiments anymore, so I switched to working with people, non-invasive experiments on people. I was fascinated by Reiki and by how it could heal. And being a scientist, I wanted to see if I could get hard data on what the Reiki was doing, what benefits it was giving, because I really feel that if we can get numerical data on what Reiki does to people, how Reiki heals people, it will become much more easy to get it accepted in mainstream medicine. And I think that's really important, because from what I've seen, Reiki is just so beneficial in so many ways with the physical body, the emotions, the spiritual aspects. It really works on all three. And I think, as I've seen from reports of people working in hospitals and from my research and other people's research, that Reiki has amazing benefits. And so it would be so good to have it more widely accepted in medicine. So here in this slide, you can see someone's placing their hands under this machine here. And this is called a Laser-Doppler Perfusion Imager. So that's a very scientific sounding term, but basically it images blood flow in the hand here. And so on the right, you can see this hand. This is the real hand. And then it's color-coded here. Blue means there isn't much blood flow. And yellow and green means there's a medium amount, and means there's a lot of blood flow. So you can see this person has high blood flow, particularly in the fingertips here. So we use this device because, you know, we know that Reiki makes people's hands hot when they're giving Reiki, and also when people are receiving Reiki, they sometimes feel hot. So I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we could actually image what was going on in the blood vessels in the hands of Reiki practitioners. So I put an ad out, and I got 30 Reiki Masters to come and participate in the experiment. And so what they would do would be, they would have their hands scanned by this Laser-Doppler Perfusion Imager, and just for a few minutes. And then I would ask them to let the Reiki energy flow through them, to give Reiki to themselves. So self-administer Reiki, and their hand would be scanned again. And then I'd ask them to stop and scan their hand again. And so here's an example on the left. This is an example of someone having their hand scanned before they do self-Reiki. And you can see there's a big blue area where there's not very much blood flow, and then some round about the joints, the finger joints, you can see there's some green and some yellow and a little bit of red here. Then they start doing the self-administered Reiki, and you can see the difference almost immediately. You can see the fingertips here are bright red. There's much more yellow and green here, meaning there's increased blood flow in the fingertips. So here we have average results from 30 Reiki Masters and 30 control participants who had their hands scanned, but they didn't do Reiki. They just gazed at like a calm picture. And so on the y-axis here, the vertical axis, this is the change in what's called perfusion, or amount of blood flow, change in the amount of blood flow in percent. And then the bottom is time, and each time point, each unit represents just over a minute, 1 minute, 15 seconds. So this whole thing is 15 minutes. And the filled in, the solid circles here show the average of the Reiki Masters. So this is how much the blood flow was increasing as time went on. So you can see the blood flow is increasing. Then you see a sudden drop here. So this first part here is when they were, before they were doing Reiki. Then you see this sudden drop. This is when they start doing Reiki. So the blood flow drops for just like a minute while they're starting to do the Reiki. And then you can see they start the Reiki and the blood flow kind of floods right back. You see it increases at 25% greater than the control, than before they do the self-Reiki. And this is when they stop the Reiki, so it kind of plateaus off here. So it's interesting how it drops before, just when they're starting up the Reiki. And I think this must be when they are maybe stating their intention and doing the symbols, and that involves some effort, some focus. And I think that's when the blood flow to the fingers drops for a while, because they perhaps it's going to the brain instead, because they're focusing at this point. And then the Reiki starts and the blood flow in the fingers increases. Then the control, these triangles, upside down triangles, this is a control. So the blood flow does increase a little bit at the beginning. Maybe they're just kind of warming up in the room, but you can see we're not getting that increase, that huge increase we got with the Reiki. It just kind of plateaus off around about 10%. And then the open circles, this is what's called reconnective healing, another kind of energy healing. And you can see that it's showing the same pattern as the Reiki Masters. So we're seeing this initial increase, then a drop as they start the reconnective healing, and then it goes up again. But you can see it's nothing like the extent that we see with the Reiki. So Reiki really seems to be specific for increasing blood flow to the fingers. So I'm going to move on to more clinical experiments now. So this was looking at people with impaired range of motion in their shoulders, meaning that they found it difficult to raise their arms up above their head. And we had 78 patients, and they had various things wrong, including arthritis and injury, bone spur, reasons for why they had an impaired range of motion with their arms. And we had 5 groups of people, 15 to 17 people per group. One group got no treatment. One group got sham Reiki. This is just a 10-minute treatment. One group got 1 10-minute treatment of Reiki, 1 reconnective healing, and 1 physical therapy. And we were interested in how their range of motion improved and whether or not they had less pain when they raised their arms up. And this is basically what we asked them to do. We asked them to raise their arms as high as they could. And then we could use the videos to measure the angle with which they could raise both their arms. And so the results here, so these are the 5 groups. So this is group 1, the control, no treatment. And this is before treatment, this is after treatment, but there's no treatment here. And then this is the sham Reiki, so absolutely no effect. And here we're looking at range of motion, where the higher the number, the higher the range of motion, the higher they can lift their arms up. Number 3 is physical therapy. So there was an increase in range of motion with physical therapy, significant increase. Number 4 is with Reiki. For some reason, the people coming in who happen to be in the Reiki group, randomly assigned to the Reiki group, they happen to have a very, very small range of motion. So they were very much impaired. And you can see the Reiki really significantly improved their range of motion. And then reconnective healing also had a big effect on range of motion. So what we found basically was that the Reiki significantly increased their range of motion, which is something you can objectively measure. And it was just as effective, if not more, than physical therapy. And then the pain. So how much was the pain reduced? This is pain before and pain after treatment. This is no treatment. This is sham Reiki. And it's interesting here that there was a kind of placebo effect. Sham Reiki, just people seeing somebody who was supposedly healing them, even though they weren't, significantly reduced their subjective pain report. And then this is physical therapy, also reduced their pain. Reiki reduced their pain, and reconnective healing did as well. So the only thing that didn't was having no treatment whatsoever. But with the range of motion, which is a more objective thing rather than subjective, Reiki had a significant effect, whereas sham Reiki didn't. And then I'll quickly move on to the knee replacement experiments. So this was done in a hospital, people going in for knee surgery, complete replacement of their joint. And we had 3 groups of people. We had, I think, between 15 and 17 in each group. And we had a Reiki group, sham Reiki, and standard care. And these numbers are how much pain improved, where 1 is the most improvement and 3 is the least improvement. So you can see Reiki scored number 1, the best for improving pain, the best for reducing the amount of pain-killing medicine, the best for reducing anxiety, the best for reducing blood pressure, the best for staying in the study. People who were in the sham Reiki group, they although it was a blinded study, they could see that the sham Reiki was not having much of an effect, and it was difficult to keep them in the study, and especially the standard of care. They didn't really want to be in the study either. So the Reiki people stayed in the study and also got discharged from hospital sooner. So that's huge. If Reiki can get people out of hospital faster after complete knee replacement, that is huge for saving money in hospitals. I'm quickly going to talk about the what's called the touchstone process. So this was started by William Rand, who is head of the International Center for Reiki Training in the US here. And he got together a group of scientists, including me, and we put together a process by which we could evaluate the scientific research that was done with Reiki. So we reviewed all preclinical and clinical studies if they were full-length papers published in peer-reviewed journals, meaning that the articles were evaluated by other scientists before they appeared in the journal. So they had to be peer-reviewed and made sure that they were robust scientifically, relevant to Reiki. And at this point, we were not doing case studies. So this is pure Reiki research. And this is an ongoing process. So we meet once a month by phone, and we have 2 evaluators for each paper that we discover that month. And then we write a summary of the study that is on a website, Center for Reiki Research, all one word, centerforreikiresearch.org. So anyone has access to that. And as of now, we have 83 articles summarized. Most of them are quantitative, meaning that they measured something that required an objective measure with numbers. 9 were qualitative, which they were more subjective, but most of them were quantitative. So you can see that there are quite a few studies on Reiki research published in good journals, peer-reviewed, that are published, 83. And this is a summary of the quality of those articles and the number of articles that we found the most useful, that gave the most useful information. And here we have the year, this is starting at 1996, and the number of articles, 1996 and then up to 2019. We have, so each of these little segments is an article, a useful article, and it's color-coded for quality. So if we're looking at the green, the turquoise and the dark blue, those are higher quality studies. So if we're looking for higher quality studies, you can see that as time progresses, we're getting more of those, these blue and green ones. To bring you up to date, we have 2 more that should go in here, 2 more good studies for 2019 and 2 more good studies so far for 2020. So you can see that Reiki research is increasing with time, and the quality of the studies on the whole is also increasing. And looking at these studies so far, we can see that the most rigorous data suggests that Reiki's positive effects are in 4 main areas. Reiki is really good at reducing chronic pain, also acute pain as well, at reducing stress and depression, at allowing people to relax, and especially if you're in a hospital, it can be very, very stressful to be in a hospital, and a Reiki session really helps people relax. And also helps the practitioners. So there are quite a few studies with nurses. Nurses are very stressed. Many of them suffer burnout. And it's been shown in several studies that Reiki really does improve their level of well-being and reduce symptoms of burnout. And recently there have been quite a number of studies on people who are receiving chemotherapy for cancer. And Reiki has definitely been shown to reduce their anxiety, reduce the side effects of the chemotherapy, the pain, mainly the pain. So pain and anxiety are reduced by Reiki for people who are undergoing chemotherapy for cancer. So that is a really big benefit of Reiki now. So these, I think, are really, the reason this research is helpful is because it gives us pointers. It shows us how Reiki can be used most effectively. And these really are the 4 main areas where Reiki shines, Reiki really helps. And I'm not saying throw away all medicines, not at all. I think Reiki is very useful as a complementary tool that helps. It helps the medicines work better, actually, because it makes people less anxious and more relaxed and lets the medicines do their job much better. So Reiki in conjunction with other medicines, and Reiki by itself as well, of course, is very effective when used in this way. So just a couple of new studies that have come out, I thought were very interesting. So one was Reiki being effective at reducing chronic pain in 30 military healthcare beneficiaries. So this is the first study I've seen where the people receiving the Reiki are in the military. So you would think perhaps they would be more skeptical than the average person. But in the study, they not only gave them Reiki sessions, they also gave them education in Reiki. And over 80% of them said that they would consider scheduling Reiki in the future. They were so, they found it so beneficial. And then another recent study, which I was involved in, this was looking at people, this was not done in a hospital or a lab, this was just people, Reiki practitioners working from their homes. We had over 1,400 people in this, 1,400 people received a single Reiki session from 99 Reiki practitioners working in their homes, and they showed significantly improved mood and well-being. This is just after a single session. And positive effects on pain, drowsiness, tiredness, nausea, appetite, shortness of breath, anxiety, and depression, depending on what their, if that was present or not in that particular person. So very wide-ranging beneficial effects of Reiki, just a single session of Reiki. So to conclude from these studies, an evidence base is emerging from the newer, better designed pilot studies and from a few larger scale studies with Reiki. And we do really need more of these larger scale clinical studies to convince people in the medical field that Reiki is really working. So randomized controlled clinical trials where we have groups that receive Reiki, groups that don't receive Reiki, groups that receive sham Reiki, and the people who are analyzing the data are not aware of the grouping. That's randomized controlled clinical trials. So to finish, I'm just going to talk about possible models for how Reiki works. We all want to know, how does Reiki work? Well, of course, nobody knows for sure how Reiki works, but there are some interesting ideas. And this is one I'm going to throw out that was proposed many years ago by Dr. Becker, and has also been presented more recently by Jim Oshman. And it all starts with lightning. So there's always somewhere in the world, there's a lightning storm going on. And the lightning actually bounces off the surface of the earth and then off the ionosphere, a layer of the atmosphere. So it's continually bouncing around in the earth's atmosphere, the lightning. And it actually sets up what's called a standing wave, which vibrates at a certain frequency. And that frequency is 7.8 hertz, or cycles per second. And that is exactly the same as the alpha brainwaves that are produced during relaxation in our brains. Exactly the same frequency. And so the idea is, maybe this wave, this called Schumann resonance, the lightning wave that is always in the Earth's atmosphere, maybe that is kind of entrading our brain waves to this alpha rhythm. And this alpha rhythm is consistent or associated with relaxation, deep relaxation. And then the brain waves don't just stay in the brain, they pass throughout the body through what's called the perineural system, the outer sheaths of the nerves. The electricity can be conducted all through the body, and then perhaps this is what is the source of the Reiki, this Schumann resonance aligning our brain waves, and then the electricity passing through the body, through the hands, and then perhaps this causes injury repair. Maybe this is how the Reiki works. That's just one possibility. And so so if we have this energy coming through, wherever it comes from, if it comes from the lightning or wherever it comes from, how does it then affect your body and other people's bodies? Well, one possibility is through what's called the biofield. I'm just going to skip to another diagram here. So each living organism has what's called a biofield around them, which is a field of information. And it's a field of information around you, partly electromagnetic, but also can be other things that we don't even know about. And this field, it is produced by the heart, mainly by the heart, but also by the brain. It's been measured. We know it's there. It can extend like 15 feet away from your body, and it vibrates. It vibrates according to mainly your heart rhythm, but also your brain waves as well. So this field is vibrating at different frequencies, and one field of one person affects the field of another person. That has been shown. So if your field is vibrating at a certain frequency, it will cause the other person's field to adapt to that frequency as well. And so it's possible that the Reiki passes through you and it will change your field. And if your field is changing, the vibrations of your field changing, when you put your hands near somebody and when you're doing Reiki, then their field will change as well. And if their field changes, then that will induce changes in their body, their whole nervous system, their mind, etc. So that's one way that perhaps Reiki is manifested, how it works, what it does to you, and then how it affects other people, perhaps working on what's called their biofield. And just to finish, I'm going to show you, first of all, the importance of Gassho breathing. Dr. Usui did Gassho breathing with his students. Remember, that is when you breathe in, breathe the Reiki in through the crown. So let's just do it. Breathe the Reiki in through the crown. So it fills your entire body. And then a slow out breath, letting the Reiki go out of every pore of your body, out off to infinity as you breathe out. Nice, deep, slow breathing. Breathing the Reiki in. Breathing the Reiki out. And Dr. Usui, he knew that the breathing helped the Reiki flow better, but he didn't have the scientific equipment that we have now. And so this is recordings that I've made. So this is heart rate along this, the y-axis, and then time along the x-axis here. And this is just 3 minutes. And this is how your heart rate will change. Even if you're just sitting down doing nothing, your heart rate doesn't just stay constant, but it just kind of varies. That's healthy. It's just heart rate adapting. But then if you do the Gassho breathing, you can see this very rhythmic pattern happens. And this is in time with breathing the Reiki in, the heart rate goes up. Breathing the Reiki out, the heart rate goes down. So this pattern happens. This pattern just doesn't just stay in your heart. It is going out to that biofield as well. And this has been shown scientifically too, that your biofield starts vibrating with this same frequency that you get with the Gassho Reiki breathing. And just to finish, I'm going to show you that animals, especially horses, are really sensitive to the vibration of the field. So you can see this horse here. And I'm going to, this is a video, very short, and you can't see her, but there is a student sitting in that pen there with the horse. She has a little device that is telling her when she gets to that what's called coherent state that you saw with the Gassho breathing, that steady rhythm of the heart going up and down with the breathing. So she's doing the Gassho breathing, and you're going to see what this horse does. And I want you to look at the horse's ears. So I'm going to start this video now. Okay, so there's the horse. Watch his ears. Okay, now watch his ears. And when you saw his ears moving, that was when the student started the Gassho breathing. So you can see that somehow or other, that horse is picking up the signal. And we've seen this countless times. So it's almost like a radio wave. And I was just thinking last night, I mean, people do distant healing with Reiki, and maybe it is like a radio wave. Maybe it can travel vast distances just like a radio wave does. So that's just something to think about. But the experiments with the horses are just really amazing. So I'm going to finish here. In 2005, the Dalai Lama came to Tucson, Arizona, where I live. And it was amazing. There were hundreds and hundreds of people there, thousands of people. And I could just see him in the far distance, this tiny little speck, but I could hear him. And he had a translator. And this is how he finished his talk. He said, there are two personal qualities that are important in life. Being calm, bad events don't affect you so much, and seeing things in perspective. And at this current time now, with the coronavirus and all its horrible effects, you can see these are two qualities that we really need. And I think that with practice, the Gassho breath definitely gives you both those qualities. So I'm going to finish here now. Just a little plug for my book. Don't forget my book, Reiki in Clinical Practice, where all the science I've been talking about, you can read more about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Anne. I love the way that you've taken us through your whole journey. And I think one of the most interesting things is when you said, once I learned Reiki, I just couldn't experiment on animals anymore. Well, not with rats anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing the changes in consciousness that come just from a very simple practice. We've got a good number of questions. A couple of you, I'm going to ask you if you can just define a bit more clearly what you mean before I ask them. So Samantha, if you could just define also for me what you mean by the underside of the hand, that would be great. And I'll ask that in a little bit. And Liad, where did I see your first question? Liad, I think you had two questions. And yeah. If you could just define also what you mean by anthropological and historic schools, if you can just really specify what you mean, and then I'll ask a conjoined question. So the first thing was just a comment by Jenny. Hi, Jenny. Must catch up soon. She said, very interesting. And Nicole Moray had got a few questions, so I'll lump them together, Anne.
Okay.
So the first one she said was, how did you define Reiki Master? And did you define spiritual lineage or a different kind of lineage? So in other words, what was the intake?
What was the second part of it?
Did you define spiritual lineage or different kind of lineages? So how are you defining Reiki Master?
Okay, so for that experiment where we used the 30 Reiki Masters, they were Usui Reiki Masters, and we just asked, you know, what level are you? And if they said Reiki Master, then we would include them in the experiment.
Okay, great. Yeah. So she, Nicole also has gone, so the amount of perfusion doesn't relate to healing experience if you compare Reiki to reconnective tissue. I think she might mean reconnective healing. You might need to just define that more clearly, Nicole. She said, does it only say with Reiki there's more perfusion but nothing more? So maybe if you can just define again the relationship between perfusion and with flow.
Yes, so okay, perfusion is basically how much blood is flowing at one given instant. So how much blood is flowing through the blood vessels in the skin of your hand. And so basically what we're seeing is that when people do Reiki on themselves, the blood vessels in the skin open up, they expand, so more blood comes through the hands, and that is what gives off the heat. So that's, you know, I was wondering just that question, why do people's hands get hot when they do Reiki? And the reason is, as you can see from this device, that the blood vessels are opening up in the skin so that more blood can pass through. And so it's part of a relaxation. So the blood vessels have to relax to open up. And bringing more blood means bringing more nutrients and more oxygen.
Yeah, and funny enough, if you speak to people teaching Qigong, or at least one of the people I know who's very much into that kind of line, he's always said Qi follows blood, or blood follows Qi, and you find that very, very much as a pattern. So if there's more blood flow, there's more Qi flowing in the body as a whole, which would also, I guess, make a lot of sense.
Actually, when I do Reiki, I always feel it in my cheeks too. I don't know if anyone else has had that experience. I feel it definitely in my cheeks.
Yeah, it's very variable. I mean, there's the times when you are literally sweating as if you're in a sauna, like the whole body just heats up. Quite amazing. So I think, as you've shown in some of your experiments, you know, the spin-off effect for the practitioner is huge. Really. Nicole also asked, what was the difference between reconnective healing and Reiki on range of motion? Though you might have actually answered that.
Yeah, both Reiki and reconnective healing improved range of motion pretty equally. So reconnective healing is different from Reiki in that it's, rather than allowing the Reiki to pass through you and your channel, kind of like a channel, with reconnective healing, they're manipulating the field, the biofield I was talking about. They're manipulating it with their hands. So it's a different kind of process.
And I think from either reading or talking with you before, there's very much a difference in the brainwaves from people doing reconnective healing and doing Reiki.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think with the reconnective healing, it's everything kind of shuts down. It's very, very highly focused. Whereas with the Reiki, it's not in a much more relaxing experience for the practitioner too.
Nicole also, she said, I think maybe when you were talking about cancer therapies and research on that, she said, was anxiety or fear not measured, or just in relation on its own? I'm just working out what she means. Was anxiety or fear measured on its own, or only in relation to chemotherapy?
Oh yes, there are plenty of studies where anxiety has been measured on its own, absolutely. And Reiki is really, really good at reducing fear and anxiety. And by measured, so most of the studies that purport to measure anxiety, they're self-report. So how anxious do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10 before and after, etc. But there are other ways of measuring anxiety too. And one that I'm particularly interested in is the heart rhythm. So not just beats per minute, but how your heart rate changes. And you can see at the end when I showed how the heart changes when you do the Gassho breathing, that is heart rate variability, that pattern. How does the pattern change? And there's a certain pattern that you see when people are overly anxious or fearful as well. So you can measure it in that way, more objectively.
Yeah, brilliant. Jenny was wondering, He said Reiki is attuned to the palms of the hands as well. Is there any reason why the machine appears to measure increased blood flow mainly within the fingers?
That's interesting. Especially, and also the joints. I think maybe there are more blood vessels around the joints, and that's what I'm guessing. And maybe more blood vessels in the fingertips, because our fingertips are very, very sensitive, and it could be that that's the reason. There's just more blood vessels there.
Yeah. We've got somebody is asking, in addition to the touchtone process, in reviewing a published RCT study on Reiki, randomized controlled trial, or designing a study, what essential criteria would you look for specifically in the study design to determine scientific rigor and quality? For example, is it number of participants? Is it the training of the practitioner? Or is it the longitudinal aspect?
That's a really, really good question. And all three of those. And in addition, is it controlled? Is there a group that receives no Reiki? Is there a group that receives sham Reiki? Are there any confounding variables? Have they made sure that they don't have, some people have had coffee, some people haven't had coffee. You have to make sure that there are no other variables that could account for the results. And the outcome parameter, is it a well-established outcome parameter? Or are you kind of measuring something? Sometimes people say, well, I've got this machine and it measures Reiki. And then they say, oh, can you have a look at it? And then I look at it and I find it's not really measuring Reiki at all. It's measuring like heat or something like that. So it has to be an established technique so that you can have confidence in the outcome parameters too. And then, of course, it's important that in the study, they report the level of training of the Reiki practitioners, the type of Reiki, etc.
Brilliant. Sarah says, thank you for such an interesting talk, and we've got a lot of thanks going on in the chat. She says, what are your thoughts on the funding aspect of Reiki research?
Oh, that's really not a nice question. Because you don't want to know my thoughts. So when I started Reiki, so here in the States, we have the National Institutes of Health, and they're responsible for most of the government funding, well, not most, but a huge fraction of the government funding of research. And beginning of this century, when I was starting up with the Reiki and everything, there was a part of the NIH called the National Center of Complementary and Alternative Medicine, and they were really keen on funding Reiki studies, and I got a 2-year grant from them. But then kind of things change, new people come into power, and they're not interested. And so since then, there has been very, very little funding by the NIH of Reiki studies. They completely have dropped it. And if you look up on their website, Reiki, I mean, they say something like, there are very few purported studies showing that Reiki has any benefits at all, which is totally, as you can see, there are 83 peer-reviewed published papers and many, it's just not true. So unfortunately, the biggest source of funding for medical research in the United States has dropped Reiki, which is really sad. And so basically, looking at who's funding the studies that we evaluate, any of them now are coming from other countries. In fact, Turkey, for some reason, we've seen quite a few from Turkey. So yeah, other countries, maybe the funding situation is better for Reiki. Maybe they're more accepting of Reiki. And perhaps we need to look at maybe private funding. Right now, the group that I meet with monthly, the Touchstone Process Group, Center for Reiki Research with William Rand, we're looking at perhaps like crowdfunding. I think that's where we need to go. I think the members of the public are more in tune with what is beneficial with regards to funding these kinds of studies than the scientific and medical community. And it's interesting because when I started the Reiki, I said that it changed my life a lot. I actually gave up my tenure at the University of Arizona because I was looked down upon when I started doing Reiki experiments and having stuff to do with Reiki. And I would hear comments like, oh, she used to be a good scientist, now look at her, because they didn't think it was real science. And then I kept an affiliation with the university, so I've kind of gone full circle. Now they're more accepting, and I'm back teaching the students. But it took a long time. But it was interesting because at that point, when I gave up my tenure because I felt rejected, people in the community were saying, "Oh, we really like what you're doing. It's really important." And that's what I mean by the community being one step ahead of the scientific and medical communities. Just the public really are more in tune with what we need.
I think you're absolutely right. And again, I remember, and it must have been an old conversation, you said that it was perfectly, you did exactly the same type of experiments you would do with Reiki, exactly the same rigor. They would get published if they were non-Reiki. They would not get published in the same journals if they were Reiki.
Right, yeah.
So much bias.
Mm-hmm.
Go back. I get off my... Okay, Colleen, can you just confirm that the earlier question about what really constitutes higher standard research has been answered? If not, just pop another little question in the bottom, and if you want more elaboration on that, because I think that might duplicate what you were asking. But if not, then please ask another. Got that one. Nicole also says, is there a study which tests HRV heart rate variability, that is before and after Reiki?
Yes, there are several studies, and they show that, okay, so in people receiving Reiki, they show an increase in heart rate variability, which is good. It means the heart is more adaptable. And one study that I did with Reiki practitioners, so I was interested in how heart rate variability changed with Reiki practitioners. And I was surprised to find that actually heart rate variability didn't increase when people were doing Reiki. And I think one reason was because even though they were Reiki masters in the study, they were not doing the Gassho breathing. When you do the Gassho breathing, you get that beautiful coherent state, increased heart rate variability, and that pattern, that wave pattern, meaning that you have a balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic parts of the nervous system. You're in good balance. And I think that Gassho breathing, a lot of people who do Reiki and teach Reiki, it seems to have kind of fallen by the wayside. And that was the reason I think that I wasn't seeing the increase in heart rate variability I expected with Reiki practitioners doing Reiki on themselves.
Okay, that's great. And again, really, really interesting for some of the things that are going to be coming up that we're involved in. Going back to Liad, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly, Liad Horowitz. He was talking about really collaboration from the more scientific to the historic. He said the scholarship on Reiki from non-clinical perspective, historical study, anthropological, 5 doctoral studies, was trying to highlight it and postulate whether collaboration was something to be taken into consideration. I think he's mentioning, yeah, here we go, Justin Stein, Doribila, Yoyan, I'm sorry if I've really mispronounced that, Yonga Hirano Naoko, and myself. And he says, I think mutual work could be really beneficial and informative. So I'm sure I can put you in touch with Anne. If you want to drop me a line, Liad, if you just put me your email, send your email to me as a panelist, and I will do that if that's okay, Anne.
Oh yes, that's very good, thank you.
All right, now I'm going back up. There are so many questions. Oh wow. Oh yeah, Samantha, this is one that she was asking about perfusion. So going back to perfusion again, she said, the images showing the blood flow in the hands were showing the top side of the hand. Were you able to scan the underside of the hand also, just to really?
We didn't, in that study, just to be consistent, we just used the top side of the hand, but yes, we can also see it on the other side of the hand too.
Okay, that's great. Liliana, hi Liliana, says, do you think it would be possible to start using Reiki to prevent illness at an early stage?
Absolutely. I think that's really a big important thing to do, to use it as a preventative. And I mean, that's what lots of people do. And several studies have shown that just doing Reiki just to keep, maintain your well-being is a really effective way of staying healthy. That's what we found with the nurses. All the studies on the nurses doing just self-Reiki every day, maintaining their health, it's the best way to use it.
Yeah, and that's going to be so relevant to us here. Christine's asked a question about recording link. Yeah, we will send out a recording link, and a couple of people have asked about slides or pages, so maybe that's something we can discuss.
Sure. Everything I've shown here has been published, or yeah.
Okay, that's great. So we'll find a way of doing that. Pauline also says, well, all the studies in the USA. I think you have answered that, but just to. So all the studies you're talking about have been not just in the US. Sorry, I said UK, didn't I? Of all the studies, sorry, Pauline, start again, rewind. Were all the studies you've talked about been in the US?
No, they were worldwide.
Yeah. Okay, Maureen, here's another interesting question. Says, one of the major concerns that may affect how Reiki is being accepted in medical settings is their worries on any negative effect, especially when we cannot really explain how Reiki works. Is there any research on this perspective, or what is your view on handling this concern from medical professionals?
Well, I mean, we all learn Reiki can do no harm. And in my experience with Reiki, I have never seen any harm done. Basically the worst thing that Reiki can do is nothing. There are no side effects. And so I think that we just have to educate people. And that study that I mentioned with the military personnel, that study wasn't just giving them Reiki, it was educating them about Reiki. So I think that's what we need to do, not just give Reiki sessions, but also educate people about Reiki. And I think that would help with that problem.
Debbie, hi Debbie. I think Debbie's over in Northern Ireland. You might have a response to this or not, I don't know. She says, what are your thoughts on the recent huge increases in the Schumann resonance, particularly noted when large groups gather online to meditate and send Reiki out? It would seem there's a definite correlation between the Schumann resonance, assuming it is the Earth's biofield or heartbeat, and focused Reiki healing or meditation. Recently, the Schumann resonance has been measured up to 10 times higher than normal.
I wasn't aware of that recent finding. So, but I do know that I also meditate. I do TM, transcendental meditation, and so when you have like thousands and thousands of people meditating together, like when you have thousands of people doing Reiki together, it does have an effect, a huge effect on the outside world, and I think that's what we need right now. And yeah, and if that's also if that's correlated also with the change in Schumann resonance, I mean, that can only help.
Okay, Pauline says, I've experienced very cold hands at times too. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, me too. I've experienced cold hands as well. So, there's a lot that we don't know about Reiki. So we're learning all the time. And every session is different. I mean, even, every session, if you just do it on yourself, is different. And so there are all these other variables that we don't know about. So it's not just Reiki always gives causes hands to be warm, because sometimes it does. I think on the whole it does. I mean, in those experiments that we did, on the whole it does, but there are definitely times when I have cold hands. Yeah, and we just don't know enough. That's just, we have lots to learn.
We do. Oh, Christine, she says really more of a comment. She says she's been a Reiki Master for 22 years. She's in Belgium. She's setting up a Reiki program in a hospital in Bruges. Fantastic. Our doctor hematologist is very interested in a treatment program here for his, I think it's leukemia patients. She said, so these randomized studies could help to submit if necessary, could help him.
Oh yeah.
Pauline, again, you might or might not know the answer to this one when I get back. She feels there's a barrier from professionals in the UK with using Reiki with cancer patients. Are there UK studies to help break down these barriers?
So the resistance to using Reiki for cancer patients, what reasons do they give?
I'm not sure. Pauline, do you want to just elaborate on that a tiny bit? Because I know some of the places that Reiki is being used in hospitals in the UK is particularly in cancer settings, or certainly at the Marsden, and also at St George's in Tooting. So if you could just be a bit more clear, please. Oh, and Christine, yeah.
I think it's important to, if you're doing Reiki with cancer patients, it's really important not to give them false expectations. It's not like, okay, your tumor is going to shrink when you get Reiki. No, we can say pretty much for sure that you will feel less anxious and probably less pain, less anxiety and less pain, less fear, more come to terms with things, but don't give any false expectations.
Yeah. And Christine just says, would like a link to find the summaries your group made on the good studies done. Actually, Anne, if you can send that to me, I can put it in the follow-up email with the recording link. If there's a, and yeah, I'll put it in there so it goes out to everyone.
Yeah, a link for the studies.
Yeah.
I can give. It's I can send you the URL, centerforreikiresearch.org. Everything's up there.
Okay, I'll find that one.
Yeah,
I'll put it in. Louise says, and did you say that the 7.8 Hertz wave is the ionosphere around the Earth?
So no, the 7.8 Hertz is the frequency of the Schumann resonance. So that the lightning that is kind of bouncing off the surface of the Earth, then bouncing off a layer of the atmosphere called the ionosphere. So it's kind of bouncing up and down all around the Earth, and it sets up a wave. And that's the frequency of that wave is 7.8 Hertz.
Anita says, during a Reiki healing session, has anyone else experienced the Healy feeling hands in a different place when the hands are actually in another place? I think that's kind of to everyone, really.
Yeah.
So see what other people say, and I think it is very common.
Yeah, I mean, often I get clients and they say, oh, I thought your hands were there. I thought your hands were on my stomach, and then I can see your hands on my head.
And Samantha says, has this webinar been recorded to send out to members? Yes, it is being recorded, so you will get a recording link. Anonymous attendee, again, if you email me, I'll put you in touch. She said, and I have some additional questions regarding running a clinical trial. How can we connect with you in the future? Or would your book speak to potential in-depth questions?
Yeah, just put her in touch with me.
Okay, just send me an email. And Liad says she would love to invite you to, or he, sorry, to speak to the Israeli Reiki Master community, and how can I contact her? Ditto, I'll put you in touch, Liad, just drop me an email, the one that I've put in the chat. Val Goff, she's up in Hull, says, I think Reiki is much more accepted these days as people are waking up. It's the powers that be who want us on drugs that are our challenges, Reiki.
Actually, that's true. I think that could be a reason why we're having the problem in the States with Reiki. I think maybe in Europe it's even more accepted than in the States. And the one problem is the big power, the power of the drug companies here, huge. Reiki isn't going to make them a lot of money.
Yeah.
And also, it's not, we don't want, no, the drug companies don't want you to be cured because you won't want the drugs anymore. So.
Really, isn't it? Okay. Come back to Nicole. Christine, I've taken a note of your email. Christine says, actually, is there a specific study showing Reiki being used with leukemia patients that you're aware of?
I think there is. Yeah, I think there is a study. So yeah, just go to that Center for Reiki Research.org. And it's pretty recent. It's quite a recent one. I think it was leukemia in children.
Fantastic. I hope that answers your question, Christine, and that's really helpful. So to get back to Nicole, she says, so Gassho breathing helps heart rate variability in Reiki. Have you also seen Reiki practitioners going to Gassho breathing naturally? And she says, I hope my question's clear. I think that's really clear, Nicole.
Yeah. I mean, actually, the more you do Gassho breathing, the more it becomes the normal way you breathe. And a study was done a long time ago, 1981, and it was published in Science, in the very important journal Science. And they showed that when people were doing, counting the rosary or doing some form of meditation, they naturally went to that deep, slow breathing, similar to the Gassho.
Brilliant.
Seems to be like a meditative go-to, yeah.
And Debbie says, Debbie Weil, where can we find the written study on the horse? Is there a written study on the horse, or is that?
So there, okay, that particular, yeah, I mean, I've published studies about our research on horses, but at this point, there isn't a written study showing that the Gassho breathing attracts the horse. I have a collaborator, Linda Kohanoff, and we are putting together articles about that. Yeah, we've found it's fascinating that if you have a horse like freely walking around and you try and get the horse's attention, you do the Gassho breathing and then you get their attention.
Very interesting. But there's some, well, completely unrelated, but if people look up, I think it's Stanley's, I don't know, Superman, watching somebody who works with energy key actually get a whole field of, I think it was llamas or some really ridiculous animal, to sit and lie down. Look that up on YouTube, it's fascinating. Debbie Barr says, Elizabeth Peru writes a lot about human resonance, that's just for anyone. Stefan Stadelman wanted to mention that the European Reiki group is maintaining a database on scientific studies, peer reviews, currently 200 been working on the backlog of 50 in 6 languages. And his URL is www.reiki.group/science, and it's accessible to
Could you send that to me?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let me just, no, I can't copy it. I'll remember it.
All right.
Anonymous attendee says, regarding harm, I would like to suggest that we take a bit more critical stance on that. I had a participant in a study that could not sleep for 3 days after receiving Reiki. She definitely felt that it has caused her harm. While the causal effect could be argued, she was convinced. Maybe the definition of harm needs to be clarified. Now, I'm going to add something onto that, which is, I think, for anyone who's got hold of Robert Fuston's book on Reiki that he published about 2017, which is it's a great book, and he recounts Takata's experience when she was having 2 solid Reiki treatments a day, when her body started to go into detox, and she had huge need to rush to the toilet without going any further. So I think this, I don't know your opinions, Anne, but I think this is about education again, and it comes down to explaining what the body's response is to interventions that allow it to go through a natural process.
I think that's a really important point, that sometimes the Reiki will make things appear to get worse before they get better. And that is for that very same reason. It's the body's responding. Maybe the immune system is getting to work harder to get rid of what it is, because the Reiki helps the body heal itself.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot that we could really educate people on, in that fact that very often what people consider to be bad things are in fact really positive responses that the body is now able to do what it would normally do, but was not able to do before because it did not have the resources. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nicole, I think is more or less saying the same thing. Seeing symptoms get worse, exactly what you just said. Weird symptoms come up with Reiki. I think all of us have seen that, which confuse practitioners and doctors. Reiki is safe, but seems to have the healing crisis all right, because quite often when we're going through and clearing illnesses, that is the body's response. It's not the Reiki, it's the body's response, and that is the education that we need to get apart from people, that it's actually very positive. Christine says, thanks, that's what I need, looking forward to the follow-up email. Dory Beeler would love to speak to you about clinical trials. I'll just make a note of her email. Pauline, so it'll give you Pauline Tambini, who was saying about negative attitude to Reiki and cancer in the UK. So here we go. She said, I tried to volunteer as a Reiki practitioner with the local cancer care, but they said they didn't offer Reiki as we're unsure of it. So any UK studies might back up how Reiki helps cancer patients.
Yeah.
Right. And Christine again says, do you speak at medical conferences for doctors about Reiki as a complementary therapy? USA.
Yeah.
Do. Brilliant. Dina. I'm trying to keep Dory's email while I jot it down. Just bear with me. Right, got it. I know we're overrunning, so I'm really grateful to everyone who's stuck with us, and Anne for sticking, but there's so many questions. And actually, I think you might have an idea about this. This is Samantha, who's down in Bristol. I think part of the barrier in getting this information out to people is the nature in which the studies are presented. Cannot be easily understood by most people who are not scientifically minded. How can we get it out in simple terms?
Well, I mean, when I describe my scientific experiments, I try and do that. I try and put it in language that anyone without a scientific background can understand. So, and I'm sure there are many other people like me, scientists who are Reiki practitioners, who can do that. So that is what we need to do. And also the, as I mentioned, the website centerforreikiresearch.org, we make an effort to summarize the research studies in language that most people can understand.
Great. And Colleen Delaney, I think she says the prayer comments have addressed it, and she just says a comment. The University of Weil Medical Center in Seattle, I'm really sorry if that isn't the right way of pronouncing it, has an energy team which includes Reiki, and inpatients can elect to receive it. It might be a source for Anne to have additional participants in her clinical trials. So that would be great. I actually think we've got to the end of those questions. Oh, okay. If you're in chat, have you got a couple more minutes, Anne?
Yeah.
Bert Tolan says, what kind of device was used to measure the student's state? The one who treated the horse.
Oh, that was, so that was a little device called an M-Wave from the Institute of Heart Math.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot there was one more question. And here it is. Alison Sanford, who's very interested in horses and has done some research. She says, do you think the Reiki is engaging the tonic balance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a major way, route that it works in the body. It stimulates the parasympathetic, that causes a relaxation response.
Okay.
Stimulates the vagal nerve, and the vagal nerve releases acetylcholine, that is an anti-inflammatory. So works in several ways through the autonomic nervous system.
Okay. I think Anita said, are there any studies on lupus?
Lupus, I don't think so.
Okay. And Marianne just said, do you need to be attuned to Reiki 1, 2 or Master to perform Gassho breathing? Well,
no. You can actually, okay, so the Gassho, technically Gassho breathing is breathing in the Reiki through the crown, filling your whole body, and as you breathe out, it going outside of every pore of the body to infinity, nice, deeply and slowly. But you can also do it without breathing in Reiki. So you can just breathe, imagine light. You can imagine light coming in, breathing in light into your body and light going out, and you'll get the same effect with the heart rate variability.
In fact, Alison's just said Gassho breathing would more closely replicate the natural breathing of a relaxed horse, about 8 to 12 breaths per minute.
Totally. And something else, I didn't show this in the slides, but we have measured heart rate variability in the horses, and we see when horses are just hanging out, just relaxing, we see that wave, that wave that we see with the humans with the Gassho breathing. We see it in the horses, but it's at a lower frequency.
One suggestion from Anita, and then really we are going to wrap up. She just said the cold hands, going back to the cold hands question, may be experienced when dealing with an inflammation where the condition needs to be cooled down. It's a suggestion. Yeah. Okay, Colleen, I will use the last name when I see it, absolutely. We got lots of thanks. Jonathan Stewart, Louise Costello, and lots of thanks for the information. I think we are. I will just suddenly go back from Christine. She says she's just the idea. I think basically it was called something else, and she's really saying, does it make such a difference in a session by beginning with the actual Gassho breathing? Absolutely, yeah. I do all my sessions starting with that. Me too. Jenny Dean Hill says, fantastic webinar, I'm excited. Right, two more. Actually, Francis has just shared the Reiki group /science link. I think that is about it. Let's go back and check. So much. It's been such a brilliant webinar and so much fantastic information. Just to get right down to the back. Again, just many thanks from so many people. Anita says, what is the panelist email? I'll send you that. I'll type it again. I'll type it 9. There you go. And we've got that one. Thank you for organising. I sent that. Liliana says, thank you, I really loved it. It's more or less what everybody's saying. It's such a treat. It's such a treat to just be able to talk with somebody, to interact, to have, straightforward responses. It's fantastic. And again, thank you everyone who's turned up today. We will send a recording out, so share it with people. Research is so important. Also, just to say, look out for some a research project and also helping the stressed NHS project, which is going to be coming out very, very soon. We'd love you to get involved with that. And most of all, thank you to Anne for her time, her dedication, her ability to explain complicated research in a very simple way, and the courage that she had to jump from physiology into something which is, I suppose, so different. I was going to say like a black hole for most researchers. That's what came into my head, so I thought I'd say it. But the courage and the dedication to follow through and dedicate her life and her time to really exploring all the questions that come up.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to talk with you, Anne, always. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you and goodbye to everyone.
Okay.